We're going to be using D2 biological solution, which is based on a quaternary ammonium, which is not going to be harmful to any stone. Stones that are really deteriorated, advanced like sugaring on a marble or a delamination on a brownstone, we can still apply the cleaner. We don't even have to touch the stone. So mechanical, touching is only going to be good if it's stable. So we could go ahead and apply the solution directly to the stone. We don't have to pre-wet it. There's some confusion about that. You could pre-wet a stone with water first. However, you're just going to dilute the cleaning solution, so it is unnecessary to do that. Additionally, with lichens like this, we could wet it with water and scrape them off first, and that would be an option. But we find it is more effective to just apply the cleaner first and let it start to work. We're going to let it dwell on it for at least a few minutes, 5 or 10, 15 minutes, and we can just get to work pretty much right away. Plastic scrapers are going to be the first option for raised lichen, and not every stone is going to have raised lichen. A lot of the marble here don't have really much raised, and a lot of that staining is either a very thin lichen that's more firmly attached, or is molds that are under the surface of the stone. And so the lichens are going to be the thing you can scrape, and so a soft plastic scraper, you can go ahead and just remove some of that lichen. This will be really quick results on this, and a lot of fun to scrape off lichen that's loosely attached. So we're going to use a soft plastic. These are the scrapers that we use, that we sell, and they're meant to wear away easily. And they're flexible plastic. It's soft. You can see the way it bends. It doesn't crack. And the idea is that these are used a little bit. It rounds them out pretty quickly because the scrapers wear away quickly. They're disposable. They're meant to wear away, and that way it protects the stone, okay? And so if we have raised lichen again and the stone is stable, then we can save a lot of time by scraping it off, okay? We don't always use the scrapers. Then the next step, we'll move on to brushes, and we'll talk about different brushes and go from there.
So if you chose not to scrape, if you wait a couple weeks or whatever, that lichen would just fall off?
It might take a little longer than a couple of weeks, but eventually, yes, it'll fall off on its own.
There are many different kinds of lichen, and some are very aggressive, and some don't really fall off. They might eventually weather away. This one is one of those lichens, and you can't see too much on the back, but it's coming around the top to the front. It's very thin and very aggressive, and you're not going to have any luck scraping it off because it's fused into the stone. It's like lichen lives off of the stone. It's like a synergistic relationship. It actually digests the stone. And so some lichens are much more aggressive than others. Some might be more just cosmetically affecting it, but over the course of period of time, especially the thinner lichens actually just eat the stone away. We're seeing this all over the country. And on some of the stones where we remove the lichen, you can see the stone is pitted underneath. It's actually less stone there. And even if you wait a long period of time for it to naturally shed itself of the growth, the stone is diminished underneath it. The brush that Alicia's using there is about to use is a Tampico brush. Here's another version. Tampico's a natural fiber. It's a soft bristle. It's highly absorbent. It gets softer when it gets wet, so you should use a lot of water, and the more water, the better the cleaning action, the less abrasion. Any brushing is a very low-level abrasion, but that's why we're using a very soft fiber, and we're not going to push hard, and just kind of
keep the stone wet.
Keep the stone really wet. What we see is most people spray it with the D2, and then they start brushing, especially on a hot day, especially in the sun. It'll dry out quite quickly, and they'll just keep brushing and brushing and brushing, and ultimately they start grinding the kind of dirt into the stone, and that actually cleans it, but more like a cleanser.
Why is that? Why does it look like you have soap on there?
Because there are surfactants in the D2 that are like soaps, but it's also a non-ionic cleaning solution. It's safe for all stone. Places like Gettysburg use only D2. In fact, we sell them 55-gallon drums. Mount Auburn buys D2 from us in quantity, and many of the most prestigious cemeteries in the country.
And are these supplies only available through you, or can we find them in other places?
So D2 is not a product we own, but we are the biggest distributor in the country. There are other distributors. However, we have all of the associated
all right.
other supplies.
And that includes also the flexible plastic.
Yeah, and well, the whole point also is that we are sponsoring ourselves to do free events all over
Okay.
the country to
Great.
promote our business. But there are some other sources for D2. There is a website for the product as well as our own website. So the other primary type of brush is going to be a synthetic. And the handle style, this is a Fender or utility brush, but it's a synthetic bristle. I'm talking about the bristle. There's many different hardness of bristles. This is a much softer material than a lot of synthetics. You could rub it on a sensitive area of your skin. It's not aggressive. And we don't want to use a really, really stiff brush that you'd like clean floors with aggressively, or like a Scotch-Brite or something like that, because it's going to wear away the stone. All the brushes that we also have, these small detail brushes, and this is like a grout style brush, tile and grout brush. We can also use the plastic back as a little scraper on these. These are a nylon bristle. It's a little more abrasive, but there's not that many bristles, and they bend over easily, so we're using this more in targeted areas. And we have a lot of other detail brushes. The sprayers we're using as well, a great American company, Fountainhead is the company, and so we use this to apply the D2. We could also spray it right out of the quart container. I'll also say that it's undiluted, like we just poured it out of a gallon into this sprayer, and we also have these quart sprayers, which are the same exact product. It is best to use it undiluted. It is already in a highly diluted solution. However, if we're re-cleaning something a few years after it's originally been cleaned and it's a very thin kind of growth coming back, we could use a diluted solution, maybe half D2, half water, and to save on the product usage and lower the cost. Yes, in the back.
Like, so after you clean it like this, when is like a good interval you would say after to kind of...
So we just monitor it, and as it starts to need it, and so it's going to be widely variable depending on the region, amount of rainfall, type of stone, if it's in the shade, under a tree, and so I'm hearing varying things. I've done a lot of work at Mount Olivet in Frederick, Maryland, and the head of the cemetery, Ron, who's been actually running a cemetery for 50 years, maintains that stones they've cleaned 5 or 6 years ago that are in the middle direct sun, maybe historically they had more trees, he says they're still perfectly clean 5 years later. I'm hearing other regions, other people saying, you know, in a year and a half later, it starts to get a little bit of growth on it. Generally, when the growth comes back, it'll be very thin, like a green, just slight discoloration. And in that situation, you could just use a diluted solution, apply it, no brushing, no rinsing, and it will just eliminate it with the next kind of couple rainfalls. And so it's much easier to maintain something being clean once it's clean. And this was an easy one to clean, and we picked it as an example. We can you know, clean any of these stones, but again, if they're highly eroded marbles, we're probably better to apply the cleaner and not do the brushing aggressively, because we're going to be, any mechanical abrasion is putting some you know, pressure on the stone, and it can affect it slightly. Overall, what we're trying to do is use the gentlest means possible, because we want to help maintain the stones and make them readable for future generations. So there's a lot of aggressive things we could do that would be very quick on the badly stained stones, and a lot of people will give you bad advice on that are not well educated on the subject. And so like things like high pressure pressure washers can be very effective and safe on a modern granite, but on a historic stone, they will remove the staining along with some of the stone, and so it'll make it very clean very fast, but will diminish what's left. So we don't want to do that. And so again, on a modern granite, a pressure washer is an option. I mean, it's not needed usually, and I'm not recommending it, but I'm just saying it depends on what kind of material you're working on. Bleach is never a good thing. Okay, bleach is going to kill the growth, but it also is going to kill the stone. And so bleach will get in the pores of the stone, and it will continue to do damage after the fact. And it's very inexpensive. It will kill the microorganisms, but it'll also harm the stone. So we don't want to use bleach or household chemicals. They're just not going to work out well in the long run. Organization like the NCPTT, which is a long acronym but stands for the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training, They're out of Louisiana. Whether you like it or not, you're actually paying for it because they're part of the federal government. They also have videos, and other groups like the Association for Gravestone Studies is more involved with history, but there is a segment of people within that organization, like Joe Farinini, who buys products from us, who does the most educational stuff with AGS, and so they're a great group also.
Question on all the brownstones. So we find some that are not laminating, but like if you like tap on them, they seem hollow.
Correct, they are.
So should those be brushed or not brushed?
They could be lightly brushed,
good.
and
All right.
so a light brushing is not going to affect something like that. And so what's happening is there's delamination occurring inside, but it hasn't actually manifested itself into open cracking yet. And so as long as you're just gentle, like a Tampico brush or a small detail brush, just lightly is not going to hurt anything like that.
And then like on that one that's delaminating on the front, but there's a big clump of lichens on the top.
We
so
can
we
certainly
try
clean that. And
brush the
so,
lichens off.
and so, yeah, this is another great example. And there is some delamination occurring, but actually it's really stable up here. For some reason, there's movement down there. What's become, and these are actually in really good condition for brownstone for the most part. I know this has a bunch of cracks. Brownstone, like the Portland, the Connecticut brownstone, tends to blow up down here, and the mechanism is actually something called rising damp. And so when it rains and the ground gets wet, everything gets wet with the stone. But then when the sun comes out, like right now, if the ground is soaking wet, the stone actually acts as a wick, and the moisture rises through the wick, kind of like a kerosene lantern, the way you can draw the kerosene up into the wick on a historic lantern, and then it'll burn because it climbs up. And that's the same principle as rising damp. And so what happens is it rises up and then it goes out. And so down in this lower section, through thousands and thousands of wet, dry, and freeze-thaw cycles, it tends to bring minerals to the surface, and there's kind of a migration of minerals toward the surface, and it breaks up these clay bodies within the stone, and it tends to cause this kind of damage to occur low down, usually on brownstone in a tablet. So it's a very specific deterioration mechanism with brownstone. These are actually in very good condition, but these are all safe to clean as long as we're gentle with it. This would be borderline. I mean, again, we could just apply the cleaner and we could certainly scrape the edges. I mean, there's no delamination up here at all. You can generally tell by tapping it, and you can tell if it's a solid, or you get down here, hear that? Solid up here, hollow down there. So this is the exact reason why they recommend not doing gravestone rubbings, because if you get a stone like this where there's hollow areas delaminated and you put pressure on it, you could crack and break off some of this. But lightly cleaning is not going to be harmful. And up here, there's no delamination at all.
Can they be sealed so that it won't have, to stop it?
So we don't want to seal stone because it's still going to absorb the moisture and then it'll trap it. And so it'll get caught inside. We can use a breathable water repellent. We could use something called a consolidant. And we do actually have products like that. I'm not really actively promoting them very much yet, but we're going to work toward that. There's a lot of, there potentially is a lot of people that have different opinions on subjects, and there's a lot of people that are minimalists and are very afraid. But the key component is we never want to seal anything. A kitchen counter we can seal because it doesn't have to have moisture transmission. Historic buildings have to be able to shed the moisture they draw in, and so like the structure right behind here is exactly the same as the stones, and so that moisture comes into the building and it gets out through the soft historic brick and through the mortar joints. So a lot of harm is done by sealing structures like that, because then that moisture can't get out. So invariably what happens is buildings get leaks. Usually it's in flashing areas, chimneys, parapets, and associated architectural details. Water gets in the building, causes damage. Contractor comes and says, I'll seal it all and solve the problem. They create a new problem that's very hard to deal with later. If you seal something, it creates a new problem, which is condensation, because it can't breathe out, then it traps moisture in, then you get mold, you get internal deterioration. This is all outside, so it's not the same, situation. However, we don't want to seal stone outside. So, any other comments or questions?
What's the case against using Roundup?
I mean,
Well, any other than Roundup, Is it damage? Does it damage the stones at all?
It damages everything. First of all, it kills people. It's been proven to cause cancer. It's illegal in Europe. Second of all, it causes a kill area around the stones, so the soil breaks down and disintegrates, has no structural makeup to support the stones. Historic stones are held up partially by the ground. Next, it looks horrible. On top of that, when you dig up around it, then you're going to breathe it. And to go full circle, Jason Church says emphatically he did research in the lab and it deteriorates the historic stone. We're not talking about a modern granite, we're talking about marble and sandstones. And he says absolutely it is acid also, and it's detrimental to the stone. And so on every level, it's a bad thing to do. So we say thank you for not doing that here. And on top of that, it looks horrible.
We noticed with the D2 that we end up with dead grass around it.
So
for a little bit.
That's a temporary thing, and it's not going to generally the root structure.
Right.
And so, but yeah, it is in effect a biocide, but we're using it in a targeted way on the stone. If you want to minimize that, you could do two different things. You could turn the grass up so it runs through it, and then flop it back after. You could saturate the grass with some heavy water first, and then it will be so highly diluted it won't have any effect. But it will have a tendency to do that under some situations, especially hot time periods without much rainfall.
We have to have a good taste to go against our owner.
Understood. So it is incredibly harmful. And like we're seeing stones toppling, like from it literally toppling. There's no structure in the soil. We were just at this site yesterday. I mean, it was crazy. Like I dig in to like level a stone and the soil is not even soil anymore. It's like sandy silt. It has no strength and it's a disaster. So it's just a really bad thing to do in historic cemeteries. Any other questions?
Is it okay to spray marble stones where you're already seeing sugaring happening?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you want to clean them, if they have a lot of lichen or biological mold or something, yeah, it's
would
not going
you
to
still
hurt.
brush them, or would you not brush them since you're
No,
already
if it's
seeing
sugaring
sugar?
badly, we just stay away from the abrasive and we just do application only. That's always an option. Another option on really highly stained stones, or they have a really aggressive lichen especially, is we can apply the D2 cleaner and really saturate it thoroughly, and then we could cover it with a plastic bag, put a bungee around the bottom. I like to use 55-gallon drum liners that are available at home centers because they're large and clear and they'll fit almost over any stone. If you have a couple bungees or tape the bottom, leave it on for a day or a few days, and it will greatly accelerate the speed and the cleaning action. Any other questions?
So I found a very old marble gravestone from like 1809 with D2, and it turned beautifully white. I mean, when you went into the cemetery, it's like white. And then I didn't go back for like 2 years, and when I went back recently, it turned gray.
Okay, the growth is coming back, so that's a mold. And so that would be a situation where it needs probably an application. You could probably get away with a diluted solution and probably even no brushing, but it needs another application. 2 years is, I mean, it could come back. It could come back in 1 year. It's just, a lot of rainfall. It's just, every stone is different. So
The whole thing turned like a gray.
that's a mold probably.
That is a mold. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So that's going to be attributed to the region. It's related to the geology of the stone. You have microclimatic conditions depending on where the stone is, amount of rainfall, what soil type it is. There's so many variables. But
Don't shoot me. I heard a little bit of Dawn helps.
Dawn.
Using Dawn.
Dawn dish soap.
I mean, I don't think that's really very harmful. It's just not going to do that much because it's not going to kill the biological growth. So it's more of just a mild soap. There are surfactants in the D2, and so they're like soaps, but they're as a non-ionic form, which is a chemistry thing. I'm not going to recommend it, but I really don't think it's going to be that harmful either. So, What they used to use, and say before D2's been around for about 20 years, was a non-ionic solution, and that there's a bunch of different options in that. We have a product actually that's really good from the UK called Vulpex, which is a really good non-ionic solution. It's highly concentrated. You just use a little bit in water. That's really good for cleaning bronze also before you re-wax it and stuff. And also that there's many people at AGS used to talk about using things that were readily available in a different time period, like when people were doing 35mm photography, then they were using doing black and white photography, which is still done a little as a kind of specialty thing. But Triton X, which was something used in a dark room, you can take a cap full of that and make a non-ionic solution out of some different materials that weren't really intended for that application, but actually it works out that way. Just a couple footnotes, housekeeping on sprayers like this are great for rinsing. We can also use these to apply the D2. Just when you fill these up, don't go much higher than this. You need to have airspace in order to be able to use them as a sprayer. Make sure they're snug so it touches the seal, and then when we pump these up, it'll build up pressure, okay? And then we can also adjust this from going from like from a mist to more of a stream like that, and probably more toward a stream is better for rinsing. And so as they start to get low, we can just periodically pump them more. They tend to work quite well. Occasionally you get one that just doesn't seem to work quite right, and it might have an issue, a defect within it. The other sprayer we used right here, I'll just mention, I didn't really go over. These are made by the same company, Fountainhead, out of upstate New York. And I'll just release the pressure and show you that these have gotten really popular. This particular sprayer comes with a regular hand pump, which I have in my vehicle, but I just didn't get it out. This is an optional upgrade, and it's a lithium-ion battery, and it has a regulator in it. According to their research, everyone that uses these loves these, and everyone that sees them, we sell a lot of them now. And so we sell this as a set, and I didn't know the price. Someone pulled it up yesterday, and they said that this 1 gallon sprayer with this, which is optional, you also get the hand pump and then a shoulder strap and 5 different nozzles for application. The one on it now is the brass one, kind of the most heavy duty one. We just put this on snugly, press that down. It's going to build up 24 pounds pressure. It has a regulator. It's going to stop. It's going to go on and off automatically. And these are a big time saver. On big projects, I use this for application. So I'll take like a gallon of D2, put it in here, and then I just use it to apply it to the stones. It's very quick. But in situations like here, we're using it to rinse. So it's going to shut off in a second. It'll take longer to build up pressure because the water level has dropped now and there's more airspace. But once it reaches 24 psi, it's going to shut off. And then when it lowers, it'll come back on again, and it'll stop in just a second. There you go. And so this will go farther than other sprayers tend to go that far. And it'll come back on when it has to. And so these are just really awesome. This charges in about an hour or so, hour and a half, with a little connecting charger like a phone charger. And these are just really awesome, and they've gotten to be really popular.
That handle would fit the other brands of bottles.
You were gonna tell us how much it costs.
This is sold separately as an upgrade because you can buy these with, just, I have one with me, just a conventional setup with a pump. I think this sprayer alone without the pump is about $30 some odd, which is very reasonable for a really good quality sprayer compared to the junk they have at a lot of home centers. We, I think, have it with, as a kit, with this for I think $87 or something like that right now. And we also have a 10% coupon, so that's quite reasonable, really, considering the quality of the product. Last thing, this comes in a 1, a 2, or a 3 gallon size, and this head, to answer your question, will fit anything with the same thread pattern. The other big sprayer companies in America are Chapin, they're also really good, and Hudson, and those are pretty much the big 3. And all of the sub-brands that are sold at Lowe's and other places are generally made by one of those companies. So I haven't tried this on a Hudson or a Chapin, so I have no idea if it fits, honestly. Any other questions or comments?
That's a 1 gallon?
Yeah, I like it because it's convenient, it's small, it's easy to handle, and so I prefer the 1 gallon. I'll say, oh yeah, the only one that comes with only the battery from the manufacturer without the hand pump is the 2 gallon. And but then if it goes dead on the job, you have no pump at all. And so with the hand pump, you can always just go back to pumping if your battery goes dead. I carry extra batteries, so then if one goes dead, it's like power tools. I just swap it out. We also have a backpack that most people don't want because it's like a little more heavy duty, more expensive. It has more pressure. It has a separate battery that actually plugs in, and those are really heavy duty, and you get more pressure. And it holds 4 gallons, but it's more of a commercial kind of contractor type of tool.